And I'll keep an eye out for those who are going to be joining us as the time goes in. But thanks again to all those who joined last week. As I was saying, Thursday came around pretty quick. And while there's some presentation or some discussions that both Ann and John and Rob may have, your engagement, your questions, continually to punch away at this is going to be really important. The one piece that was a takeaway that Tisha from Brockton Beer talked about, and I thought it was a really great idea, is in fact, let's put together what a bid activity would look like. And fortunately, we have the holiday parade and lots of different things going on. We were supposed to schedule for tonight, but there's a lot of different things going on, including the prostate cancer event. So just know that we're going to work on something. I'm going to be applying for a Brockton Cultural Grant to perhaps work with you, Mike Lambert, on getting trolleys to be around downtown for the holidays or do some signage and do some historic signage. That's what the Cultural Council, Brockton Local Cultural Council is about, but that's also what a bid director would do, right? And cultivate and bring people together and coordinate and
find money.
That's right, and apply for money, but in supplement. So I thought it was a really good point to start that what Tish talked about, but again, it takes an effort and it takes time. So anyway, with that, Ann, you want to dig in?
Yep. So thank you.
Chris, wait a minute, Chris has a question first.
Chris, where are you? Oh, there you
go. I think an equally important takeaway from that meeting, Mary, was the 10 most commonly asked questions. The cost benefit analysis has to be addressed front and center. I know we can inspire people to pay more money, but we also need to look at the numbers to ensure people know where the money's going. The longer we ignore this, the longer we don't address it. If we spend time doing, great parties with trolleys and activities downtown and spent unpaid for, I don't know how, but yet ignore. I'm just saying, I think this needs to be addressed. And I think, Ann, you must have a model or something.
We're presenting that today, Chris.
Yep. Great, pals.
Yep.
Thank you.
I mean, just so that you know, this working committee and Rob and John and I have been really doing a lot of due diligence around putting together a budget that we think is realistic, getting some decent estimates, looking at other models, suggesting different possible fee structures and other sources of revenue. So there's been a lot of work that's gone on with this subcommittee, and Jeffrey's been on it, and Ted's been on it, and sent a number of people, Mary and those. And the idea was to be able to report back to the larger group once there's been some real, vetting and chewing on the ideas. And there are some differences of opinion about how to approach some of these things. And we're hoping that this is such a good group and that this group can kind of hash through. And obviously, Chris, those things are critical. And how do you, how do we, and I think we want to get to a point where we're comfortably making recommendations that we know a core group of property owners of various sizes and types have had the opportunity to vet and think about and chew on and fight about and determine, what do we think is fair and equitable and reasonable to bring forward.
So, and why don't we get into it?
So we're going to get into that. And John is on. John, you're on there. Where John go?
He's on his way walking into City Hall. And I think I just need to clarify. You're right. There were things that were talked about. This topic has never been ignored. It really has not. And I can, again, evidence, because we've recorded and we've told people these meetings are going, but we're here today. And John, I know, is going to be pulling up the presentation. Any other comments before, we give John a couple minutes to walk into the office?
I actually have it on my laptop too. So John and I were working on it last night. Rob?
We are having network problems here at City Hall, so hopefully John will be able to pull that up.
And why don't you pull it up?
I can pull it up. If you let me share it, I have it on my desktop.
You are co-host, so go ahead.
Okay. So let me share this. Trying to see which one is our most latest version. I think this is the latest, greatest.
It would be V3 is the latest and greatest.
Is this
So
it?
The date JF V3, which I think, yep, that's the one.
I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So
can you just go into, pull up, so the PowerPoint presentation?
Presentation mode.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay, let's see here. Where is that?
Way at the top,
You go to
slideshow.
slideshow?
I am way at the top. I'm
Go to
looking for it.
slideshow. Yeah, to the left.
Right,
There you
oh,
go, in the
right.
middle. In the middle. There you
There we
go.
go.
Yep, okay,
And then from the beginning, from the
Thanks,
beginning.
Cindy.
there we go. Thank
That's
you.
okay.
There
That's
you
okay.
go. Okay, so this is the third scenario version of the sequence of conversations that we've had. The first, and this is kind of summarized. John and I are going to attempt to summarize sort of some of the work. So for those of you who are on the working committee, some of this is going to be repetitive. For those of you who are not, you'll see where we got to some of these things. So the first conversation we had, we went through various what other bids are doing, their fee structures, their budgets, what do they hone in on, what are they spending money on, and so forth. And we left off the great big ones because the Downtown Crossing and in Newmarket and some of the others that have budgets that are in excess of several $1 million. So we've honed in on those, and then we started to play around with different fee structures and so forth. Maybe we could have somebody to put who's ever on there you go. So so we'll go from there. So just to give you some background, we just wanted to remind everybody of why we're here. What are the shared goals? We're here. The goal is to create a destination where people want to shop. We think it's worth revisiting this every time. So we kind of focus ourselves on what is this organization? What is its goal? What's it intended to do? And basically we're trying to create a vehicle that creates a destination where people want to want to invest, they want to work, they want to live, they want to locate their business, and they want to see a more vibrant experience when you come to Brockton. So we think it's worth saying that every time. What were the priorities? Now, these are the priorities that have emerged from all of the focus groups, the survey work, the individual conversations, the steering committee meetings, and others. So we talked about wanting to do some placemaking, an emphasis on clean and safe, some marketing, some advocacy, seeing this organization to be an advocate, some beautification and sort of enhanced streetscapes and those opportunities. So those are what have come out of this last 6 months of conversation. We think it's important. We looked at doing our due diligence. We looked at what are comparable size bids, budgets in other locations and what are they doing. So Worcester's budget, we're going to share this all with you. We were refining it last night, so we didn't get a chance to get it to you ahead of time, but Worcester's budget's a little over $1 million. They spend a lot of that on clean and safe placemaking activities, events, marketing. They have been very successful in recent years getting more marketing dollars through Mott and some other grant sources, partnering with a number of other organizations in the city. And they're in the process right now of entering into a contract with the city to do a lot of their cultural and arts programming that the city right now does in-house, but they feel that the bid can do it better. Springfield spends about $1.5 million. They actually get involved in some real estate development, business development activities. They have valet programs. They do a lot of that kind of stuff. They have a clean and safe effort. They do a lot of other kinds of programming and marketing. Taunton is about $344,000, and that they have a foundation and they have the bid working together under one management. They write a lot of their grants through their foundation, but through that they do a limited amount of maintenance, but marketing and events and arts and things like that. Hudson's about $150,000. They're the smallest bid. They do these kinds of activities. I'm not going to read those to you. You can all read. Hyannis is about a little over $400,000. They have started when they first started. They're an old bid. They were involved with a lot of the sort of beautification and infrastructure and trying to design a streetscape, and they sort of spend more of their time now on business development and recruiting and marketing and events and creating those kinds of opportunities in their downtown. We looked at a number of the elements that the Boston bid, Central Square and Newmarket, but their budgets are much bigger. They range in size from about a little over 2 million to a little over 6 million. They have robust ambassador programs. They have shuttles. They do a lot of other kinds of things. So, but we wanted to say, let's look at what other people are spending money on and what are their budgets and their sizes. So we did that due diligence. We then drilled down because we wanted to get comfortable with what do their ambassador or clean programs, clean and safe programs look like, and how are they doing them? So we looked at we also got their detailed budget. So we know what people are spending and we know that they're current because they're their current budgets. Springfield spends a little less than $400,000 with a local vendor for their maintenance program, their ambassador program. That vendor doesn't do any work outside of Springfield. It's a local contractor. He does this, and he's not interested in doing work outside of Springfield. Worcester spends almost 600,000, and a little shy, 575,000, because they have a big budget line item in their budget for snow removal. It's a killer. They spend about $140,000 on that. They work with Street Plus, and Street Plus is one of 2 national vendors who provide these kinds of services. And Newmarket, I've included them because Newmarket is the newest bid. It has enormous issues around cleanliness and homelessness and other kinds of issues in their district. They are piloting an in-house program that they figure on. And then this is through a contract with the city and some other Health and Human Services folks. They started with a $70,000 program and it's increased to a $600,000 program because it proved to be so successful in hiring homeless individuals to work in their maintenance, to do work with maintenance and some of these activities, and they're piling it in-house, and they're an in-house opportunity. So we wanted to look at, here are 3 different ways that people are looking at it. One is a local vendor, one is a national vendor, and one is an in-house program. Central Square and the Boston bid all contract out to a national vendor. Prices have gone up for these activities. That's the reason why we've taken some time to try to really get a real number. And it proved to be true. So that's why it took us a little longer to do this work than we thought. So we went out to try to get some estimates, and we went to the 2 national vendors who do this kind of work are Block by Block and Street Plus. Street Plus does Worcester, Block by Block does the other bids and the MBTA. We went out initially with sort of like, here, we want the world. And they came back with some initial numbers that were just way out of the realm of possibility. So we went back and said, let's take a look at something that is comparable to kind of how Worcester approaches their deployment of their clean team, and we got some numbers back. Block by Block came back with numbers, and then Street Plus came back with a revised figure that was around 400, which seemed comparable to others and made us more comfortable with what we had. We did not. Commercial District Services is a vendor that's a New Jersey-based provider, does a couple of bids in New Jersey. We did not go back and ask for a revised number for them, but we think we would see some comparable. We would include them if you wanted to go forward in an RFP, thinking that we probably would see some reduction in what they were. Looked at Spring program, and they currently have a program, an agreement with the city to provide some limited services. We have had some conversations with them about the possibility of some sort of a partnership that they could do some or maybe all. They currently don't have the bandwidth to do that right
And just
now.
out of curiosity, what is the current services they provide? I don't want to get off topic. I'm just curious.
They do some, Rob, you might want to jump in here. They think they do some barrel cleaning and a little bit of hand sweeping and some other kinds of deployment. They do a little graffiti removal, I think.
They
But it's
Mainly
limited.
non-mechanical.
They can't maintain their own
Non-mechanical
property.
small tasks.
So having a discussion with them is a moot point, but we don't have to dwell on that.
Well, let's not get sidetracked on that for
No,
a
right, I'm
second.
just,
But
okay.
one of the things we wanted to explore was if you had the opportunity to work with a local social service provider, and given the fact that this is not going to be happening tomorrow, but you could anticipate this happening, say, 10 months from now, perhaps you could design a program where they did some piece of what you wanted to do. And there may be, because of who they are, some opportunities that could be fundable through other kinds of grants that they might have access to, and also provide a community benefit. So we basically had 3 conversations with them. They're talking internally about how or if or can they really do this, but it was something that we wanted to explore. And Chris, you had your hand up.
Yes, I spoke with John Yazinski last night actually about this, and he said that they're only doing their own buildings. They're also having some other challenges right now because they're trying to move to the other side of the city, and they've got some opposition now that they didn't anticipate. But my question is, Quincy, coordinates this through their DPW. So they were able to put on extra shifts and folks volunteered for, odd hours, holiday hours, 3-day weekends, Sunday mornings to pick up trash, meaning the barrels that are out along the beach in Quincy and in the Main Street areas. I would imagine that would be a lot more cost effective. I'd like to see the DPW director and some of the heads on these calls, especially when we're talking about this stuff, because, to Joffrey's point, we don't even know what they're doing. We don't even know what they're budgeted. And if we're going to be successful at this, we can't just all of a sudden say, hey, folks, we passed this bid and we've got more money and we need you to do this. They're really going to want to be part of the construction of what their budget is, where it's deployed now, if done correctly, they'll be excited to see that in this particular area, they're getting 40 to 50, 80% more that they can focus, and they basically be able to say, all right, this is what we can do. We can add a couple more shifts. We can add overtime. I think from my perspective, that those are the models we should be following, not bringing in third parties to.
Let me just weigh in for 1 second, and before you go in. So Chris, the mayor we're not gonna be able to really bring department heads to this meeting. It really has to be through the mayor, and he's been engaged somewhat, but I think that's why we're gonna take these today. He will see this recording and he will hear this, and potentially that's where the discussion with the budgets, with Troy and others. So the comment in terms of, is there an alternative for bringing a third party? I think that's a very good suggestion. What's the cost of it? What's the capacity level? That's a question for the city to answer. And I think taking away from today, your comment to have the mayor weigh in about the, and bring that into the equation.
Frankly, I'd rather hear from the mayor of Quincy, honestly, because he ran the DPW for 15 or 18 years before he became mayor, and he's implemented this plan. I think he'd have more of an understanding of how successfully you can do this than
certainly others. Okay, Chris, I think that's a great suggestion. Certainly, if there's another model that works within the concept of what the city can do as a value add, as a supplemental value add, there's a cost associated with that. So it's determining how and how that would work. And I'm happy to explore that. You give me a contact person in Quincy, or the mayor will. We'll have that conversation with the DPW, and there is a conversation going with the DPW that you'll see as we go into these next slides in terms of both baseline services and what else the city could do. My one caution to you all, and you can do whatever you want with this, is that this is not a volunteer effort. This if you are going to do a clean ambassador program,
and frankly, I think
it needs to be either with the city through a very clear understanding of who's doing what, or with a vendor, or with in-house. It needs to be something that you're you have to have a deliverable contract with people.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nobody expecting a volunteer cleanup on Sunday morning. I think I use the word volunteer in the sense that employees don't have to or are not required to work on Sunday morning, but if they want to pick up overtime, they can.
Right, so. But what happens if no one says they want to? So I think that agreement, if that's the direction that everybody's comfortable going,
Yeah.
that agreement needs to be clear about the expectations and the delivery. So that's
I
just
don't
my point.
understand why that's not even presented as an option, that existing employees could pick up overtime. I don't understand that. But, okay.
Chris,
Let-
it's not presented as an option right now. We're happy to look at and do that as
Right.
another alternative. But I think what we wanted to do is to get comfortable with what does it cost? Because even if you do that as an expense, even if you do that through city personnel picking up overtime, there is a cost associated with that.
Yeah, I understand that.
So
I
let-
understand that, but the
So
numbers
trying to get
difference-
our head around what it actually costs to deliver this level of
Okay,
service.
great.
let me weigh in for a second, because I think it's important. Let's get through this presentation. I think to Chris's point and to what Joffrey is saying, let's find the numbers. Let's not necessarily get to those solutions yet, but because it will factor in. Let's get through the presentation. Let's talk about what those numbers are, because that's what we started off this meeting with. What are the numbers? And then let's get into the discussion and banter around alternatives or solutions. And then that's where it's going to be really that partnership with the city about what they can do, whether it's Quincy and the mayor talking to the mayor of Quincy. That's the level that it has to be at. Because in the end, it's about this for the local community, but it's also for the businesses and the property owners. So Ann, continue.
And just real quick, the quotes that we have there are cover what time span?
We have the quotes that we have there would be looking at essentially every day from like 7 to 3, and some flexible deployment when you have events and certain other kinds of things, or if there are special projects. Basically looking at the sort of a zoned a scenario where some more highly trafficked areas would have a slightly greater frequency, and than some of the other trafficked areas. We sort of laid out, what it would look like, and it was modeled in part of how Worcester has approached their delivery.
Is that an annual cost?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And that includes, the equipment and a bunch of other stuff that would be included in delivering these types of services. I think, what we really wanted to try to do was to do the due diligence of however you choose to put this together, whether it's in-house, a local vendor, contracted, or even within the city. There's a cost associated with that, and trying to come up with what seems to be a realistic number that you can use for budgeting purposes. And then if you don't want to do it that way, if you want to take a different approach to it, we certainly can say we want to do it in a different way. But we didn't want to just pick a number out of the sky and have that be reflected. But Chris, I think that's a great suggestion, and we'll certainly dive into how Quincy approaches it and what's it cost them.
Right. So let's go to the next slide then.
Okay, so we looked at a budget, and what we backed into, looking at this budget, was essentially trying to generate through the bid fees alone around $600,000. Looking at what we might work out with the city in terms of how they contributed, both in cash and kind. It could be through DPW, maybe because there's a budget associated with this kind of work. In that range, and Rob and I have had a lot of discussions around whether that's doable or not, and it's something the city is thinking about how to approach that. It's not unusual, and I've showed you many examples from all the other bids about what they do and what they generate in terms of sponsorship income, event and sponsorships. Most bids, a considerable chunk of their budget is derived that way, and it's not an unreasonable stretch. Grants are also certainly an opportunity. There's a lot of things happening with grant programs that are out there, both from the foundation world and from the state, that bids are all pursuing very successfully. I think this is a reasonable number, getting to a revenue side of around $800,000, a little over. We're suggesting that we look at a staff of one full-time person and maybe a part-time person that you would bring on. This is a professional space management person who runs these kinds of organizations. I know what people are being paid across the state. I know what they're being paid on a national level through the International Downtown Association. I think you should be thinking about probably a 1.5 equivalent FTE to run a program like this of this size. And so that's my recommendation. There's some operating expenses that come into play. Some of those you can, obviously these are like, if you had to buy everything, you probably don't. You know, you could get donated office space, there's supplies, there's equipment. You might be co-locating with an organization like Mary's. You might be able to work at some of those things. I'm carrying, you know, a budget for training, and I do think it's extremely valuable to an organization like this to go to the national conference for the IDA. You will learn a great deal of best practices and how other places are doing it. I just carried a number in there that could be lower, some travel and an annual meeting, which you should really do it in a way that produces an annual report to your property owners and members and the general public, and have it be an event. Your major program areas are, you know, sort of events, websites, your marketing, carrying a budget there. We carried $550,000 as a vendor contract for your Clean and Safe program. I think that number might be a little lower than that, but I think that's a number to look at. Some landscaping and beautification that you might phase in. You could do some things. You might be able to get some things from the city that they invest in, like planters. If you wanted to do some things that are, you add every year, you add a few into your landscape, and then after a few years of gearing this up into a stabilized year, you're able to, you know, have some of that infrastructure in place, and then carrying some money for some business development programming. And I think that what I've seen other people talk about in these conversations are around tenant recruitment, ideas, maybe some market study, market analysis, actually going out and trying to promote opportunities for recruiting tenants into spaces that are available with a desired tenant mix. And then some other things you'll need a little money for accounting, because it's a 501c3. You'll need to do an audit, maybe some legal fees that might be more upfront and less over time. And there you will carry insurance like D&O insurance and other general liability and other insurances. And I'm pulling these numbers based on what the reality is from some of the other bids out there around the state, and what those numbers are. These may be a little, so I feel that this is this addresses the priorities that you have all expressed. It looks at a fee structure that we think is not and we'll get to the fee structure because it's coming, the various scenarios we're discussing, and how the city might participate and how you might bring in other income, which is not unusual for bids at all. They all do it through other kinds of pursuing other kinds of grant and sponsorship opportunities. That's and obviously this is to change if you guys all say no, we don't want to do any of this, you know, but this is based on what we have, the work that we have done so far over the last 6 months. These are the priorities you said, and this is what we want to pursue. So this is what we think is a reasonable, realistic budget to look at.
I think it's really helpful. I think it's extremely helpful, and I agree with these numbers on the most part. And I think it's a good budget to look at and to share and to have a good sense of what we're talking about.
Okay, and we have for all of the people want to take a look, people are spending on these kinds of activities. I think that, those are all available to you. I think we've shared them in the PowerPoints that we have shared, Mary. I think they've been shared with the whole group, or they're up, but this working group has seen all of that information, and that's all available to you. So then we wanted to continue, and this is still a work in progress. So this is not linear. We've been having these conversations for the last couple of months, and I think, Rob, I want you and John to chime in here, but now that we've had the meeting with the mayor and the mayor has expressed his support for this idea, John or Rob's going to be able to, to really look at cementing, what are the baseline services that the city does, and actually putting those into this MOU that we are going to be working out with the city. But this is a work in progress. And so because we really do want to say, have you all be very comfortable and say, these are your baseline services. This is what you should and expect to receive based on your taxes. And this is what the city really does. We've asked the city departments not to tell us things that you're really not doing. Just tell us what you really can do and are doing in a normal year. And obviously they're going to be, something really bad happens, you're going to have that change. But that in terms of the MOU, these kinds of things are reviewed periodically so that the bid and the city can look at, these are the baseline services we're providing, so that you have a comfort level that there's not an erosion of these services. And sometimes the city can look at, well, this is what we're doing, and maybe we can do different kinds of things. To get to your point, Chris, around the, maybe there is a way to look at what kind of supplemental things might the city be able to do in terms of some of these other kinds of things. Then we looked at what the city could contribute in terms of being a bid partner. Now, this is a work in progress. This is where we are right now. And again, this ties back to our priorities. This ties back to, like the clean and safe programs. This ties back to some of these other things. This is what the city has identified, or they are discussing right now. These are important things. These all cost money, and these all could play into the cost of, once we have figured out what the city could contribute, and this may include, additional manpower to do these things. This would then affect, what that bottom line budget looks like for the, for our clean and safe program. But these are some of the things that Rob is in the process of discussing as internally with the various city departments. Rob, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you said it all.
Okay, and then there's one more thing. And then there's other kinds of capital improvements and priority priority projects that the city is looking at or is anticipating. And Rob has put this together, and this is something that we would also put into, an MOU document. And basically it helps guide, some of these kind of major investments that the bid could support the city in terms of trying to secure funding to implement, that are consistent with what you're trying to do as part of your plan. Again, Rob, jump in here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's a series of capital improvements that I'm hoping to get the mayor to sign off on. Some things are already in the queue, such as the expansion or the creation of Sycamore Grove. Then there's other spaces throughout the city that need greening, street improvements that we would all agree to, and the city would program.
I think the major takeaway that we had with our conversations with the mayor was to ensure, and John and Joe did a great job of ensuring that the city, and through the mayor's office, sees themselves as partners in this effort, and not only participants in the bid, but also partners with the kinds of things that the bid could never afford to do, but the city may have the ability to find the resources to do it. And I thought that was a very strong statement from the mayor that they intend to approach this in this way.
In terms of those priorities, the two-way traffic, I think, I remember when Pat Chiaramella was at OCPC, he was focused on trying to get that on the list and have it improved by the state. There was some initial movement on that. This goes back 20 years now, but he felt as though around now that would move to the top of the list. Is there anything?
Let me weigh in on that, Chris, because since I've been here for about 4 years, it's about $47 million, and somewhere around that number, and it's too much. I mean, it just would eat up the tip for the next 5 years for us. So, but we've been working with the city and with our state partners on other avenues for that, and working on applying for particularly federal funding through the BIL.
Thank you. I was wondering on that.
Yeah, we're trying to secure the planning funding. The initial phase of planning is $6.5 million. And that is a big chunk of change. And that only gets us to a 30% design. There's another
Wow.
8 million after that to get us to final design. And then we've got to figure out how we pay for the, how we get it programmed on the tip. So
So going
there-
back, Rob, I think, go ahead. I was just going to say on these capital that have been listed, and again, it's focusing within the downtown area. And it's, these could from one year to the next, depending upon where federal funding and or other opportunities may be. We're constantly getting calls from Paul Lumano from the Troy Clark's office from at here at OCPC about looking for different ways. And obviously with federal funding, you just don't know where the next one comes. But I think the idea is that those that have been listed really are within the boundaries of the bid that we've been looking at. And again, the foot traffic and pedestrian as well as vehicle traffic, because we just don't want people to be sitting in traffic. We want them to be parking, coming, walking, and engaging with the local businesses.
Yeah, I think this is the advocacy role that you see the bid being able to play to make sure that, if the city or the regional planning organizations and others are trying to secure the kind of level of funding that's required for these major street and these major infrastructure investments, having the support of the property owners and the businesses in this area that's going to be impacted is important. And this is a partnership that allows you to achieve some of these long-term major infrastructure project goals.
Can I jump in for just a second? Speaking of advocacy, the two-way traffic and a lot of the green spaces are ARPA eligible. And the only one who, the mayor is only hearing from me saying, spend money on these things. I'm a one-man band here, but we've got another chunk of ARPA funds coming in next year that haven't been allocated, and we need to get those on the list. And right now, that's it's critical.
Well, certainly, Rob, on that note, the DBA, as being the convener of can be helpful in weighing in as well.
And there's a lot of competing forces out there, and all of them are just as important, but they all have advocates, and there is no advocate for infrastructure.
And that this is a critical role that an organization like this could play. I mean, if everyone supports these ideas, they could be in full force as a unified voice supporting that with the city council and the mayor. Okay, so then we're going to share this with everyone so you can think about this, because it's going to be a lot of information. So John, you're on this call, right? You're there?
I sure am.
All right, so John and I are going to tag team this. So we had at our last working group conversation, we played around with a half dozen or so different scenarios around how do we get to that $600,000 number that we think we probably need to generate from fees if we want to support this budget that we've presented. So we have a whole bunch of other ones here that we're going to walk through, not asking anyone to say this is it, because our next steps are to continue to massage this within this working group, to come back with here's our proposed fee structure scenario, giving in mind that we're trying to get close to that budget number that we are carrying in the budget. So here's where we are. So John, I'm gonna so basically this is a summary of we looked at John, do you want to walk these these through, because you're going to have to think about, all of you are going to have to think about these but this is kind of a high level overview about how this works, how each one of these scenarios works. So John, I'm gonna let you
Absolutely.
talk through
So-
them and I'll chime in too.
So I had taken a few of or actually two specifically, of the previous versions of our fee scenarios that gained popular traction and just kind of tweaked the numbers. So on this first scenario, and I have many different scenarios, this first scenario is regardless of its use, we kind of didn't really want to keep the use variation in there. So each parcel is assessed as its, assessed value, and it is all, the fee is assessed on the total value of each parcel. So on that, I'm only making that delineation because the next ones are not. So the total value in increments up to 10 million are these digits. So anything under 1 million, which the vast majority of our parcels are going to be paying that 005 digit there. So that is 5 1/1000ths of a percent.
So
Anyway,
we
Right.
tried to look at, pick out different properties and say, okay, what would the average payment be? And it works out to being around $119 a month.
and that yields us, yes, slightly
And
over
that yields us
$500,000.
about almost $600,000.
So, and as it says in the top there, the nonprofits would have a negotiated agreement starting at a $1,000 base, which, the bid could adjust fittingly based on the user or, their willingness to add more to the pot.
And this doesn't include any publicly owned properties, which they would be dealt with through that MOU.
Correct.
And it excludes small individual residential. All of these exclude residential units under 4
Under 4.
units and residential condominiums.
I'm gonna let you guys finish the presentation. I just want to make one point as we go through this, for everyone to hear. I spent some time looking at this. In my personal opinion, the only way this is going to work is if there's going to be a flat structure across the board. That's my personal opinion. Okay, and let me give you guys some quick analytics to back that up. If you have a property worth $4.5 million, can you go back to the previous example? I know there's different scenarios, but I want to give you an example as to why I feel that, and then I'm going to be quiet. If you go back to the previous example, if you have a property worth $4.5 million, okay, at 0.0025%, you're looking at an annual cost of $11,250. Now, if you have another property at $5 million, let's say it's assessed $500,000 more, you're looking at an annual cost of $5,000. It doesn't make sense. It's not rational. And there's no form of graduated scale that's going to be equitable across all borders, at least that I could find analytically. So in my opinion, the only way this is going to work is the flat charge with caps, obviously, for, certain amounts. I mean, it's not fair that, for example, Jonathan Raymer's properties are going to pay $100,000 a year. It's not realistic, and they're not going to do
They're
it. And
not.
this would fall apart. So, but I guess my point is the graduated scale doesn't work for the example I just gave. And you know what? When they do the assessed values every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, and they adjust them, if you're at 4.8 and then a 5 million, it's not fair that you're paying double or triple. It doesn't make sense numbers wise, and it's not equitable. So I'm going to be quiet. That's my opinion.
I 100% agree, Joffrey, and I do not like this scenario, but I wanted to play it out because it was a scenario in a previous one that had gained some traction with our group.
Yeah,
That is
John,
not
you
my
haven't-
preferred scenario.
Jeffrey,
I
you
say
haven't,
throw it out. It doesn't work.
these are new scenarios that John and I just finished up last night. So
No, I understand that. I'm just saying
Thank you,
after,
Joffrey.
I'll be quiet, but like I said, after looking at it, if the scenarios don't work, let's not look at them. And I
And-
think that, I think a flat fee has to be done across the board unless you can find a way to make it work analytically, but I don't think it's possible.
Okay, I
I'll be
had
quiet.
that same concern, Joffrey, with something being 4.99 mil and then 5.01 mil. They have vastly different assessments.
Right,
So yeah, I agree.
And it's impossible to control that, impossible.
I think
so-
we get somewhere close in some of the following scenarios.
So,
if we
so
just-
let's walk through, the scenarios, and there's a summary thing at the end. And yeah, this is taking some more work, Jeffrey. And this is the work that we're asking this working group to do. And you've been great about running some of those assessments as well. And And
I
we're,
haven't seen
we start,
anything. I'm looking at this for the first time, so I'll
yeah,
be
so
quiet
this
and
is,
let you
this was,
go.
this is kind of building off of our conversation that the working group had last time around a couple of the scenarios that seemed to have a little more traction, and we were playing them out a little bit further. So
Okay.
we're gonna run through some other ones here too. So,
So again, the same problems may apply here with the structuring and of the different tiers. But in this scenario, the nonprofits, instead of their $1,000 base, they would pay a half fee. So, you know, for anything under $1 million, it'd be 0.005, but for nonprofits, it would be 0.0025. Just trying to play with numbers, you know, get everyone happy with what the results may be. And then, so this scenario yields us $612,000 with an average payment of $1,666 yearly, $123 a month. But yes, the same issues would, and also with this 1B3, I promise this is the last one of the same scenario. Again, I was just trying to tweak the numbers so we could have a different yield, maybe have some less upset property owners who have high value properties, et cetera. But in this scenario, the nonprofits are included as paying the full boat that everyone else is. Again, all these exclude, yep, Joffrey.
I just got to give my 2 cents again. I really feel like too, after kind of driving into numbers, and again, I'm just giving my thoughts because I want everyone here to be aware of them. Everyone needs to pay. For example, you were telling me that the post office, you know, can't afford to pay, you know, something. It's not right. They're taking up huge parcel of land. You're telling me that Vicentes isn't going to pay anything. I mean, again, I think that everyone has to have, you know, something in the game, so to say. And the other thing is, I think even vacant properties should be assessed as well. Okay, I'll tell you why. I think that it's going to, you know, provide some pressure to actually do something. You know, why should they be left out just because they're vacant? You know, and again, I'm kind of hurting myself with that comment as well, so to say. But why should vacant property be left out of the game? You know, it's going to induce, you know, movement, development, and progress, I think. So again, I feel like that was important to say to the group.
thank you, Jeffrey. That is important. Thanks.
Definitely. So these are takes on a different scenario. In these scenarios, the first $1 million of all properties, regardless of how valuable the property is, are assessed at this 0.003 rate. So that way it evens out things a little bit more. So everyone on their first $1 million is paying that rate. And then for each successive portion of the value of each property, so say you have a $5 million property, the first $1 million is assessed at 0.003. The next $1 to $3 million is 0.0015. And then from the 3 to 5 is 0.0075. And then we will aggregate all of those assessments into what their payment will be. And then again, so it graduates as your property gets more valuable, you pay less of an assessment, but that assessment is not, it is assessed at just that top tier. And then each chunk underneath it is assessed at those lower tiers, aggregating. So again, publicly owned properties will be a negotiated agreement. And in this one, yes, all properties are included, including non-profits.
Yeah.
And then again, this is just a variation on that same scenario, just playing with the numbers, adjusting the assessment values so we can try to get a yield that would be close to what our budget would call for. So these are exactly the same. The only difference being what the assessment figures are. In this one, it's 0.004, whereas the previous one was 0.0035, I think. Just slight tweaks, but it does yield a bit more in this one.
John, I
just
can ask you one
half
question.
a percent.
How would this, and again, this is more clerical, but going back to a flat base, how in the world would this be billed out? You know, how would you even bill property owners? Would you have a graduated scale? Do you guys have software? I guess you can do one transaction across the, you know, have a flat rate, but do you have software where you can actually, you know, not have to go in manually and do this? Let's
Yeah,
say there was
what
some sort of
usually happens,
graduated scale.
Jeffrey, what happens, Jeffrey, is that in all the other bids, and a lot of the bids have a graduated rate, like there's some sort of thing where you have different kinds of calculations based on size and type or whatever, but so that it's not just a straight calculation across the board. Most other bids work with the city to do that calculation and give it to the city collector's office. They put it into their system.
Okay, all right.
And that's how all the other bids do it. And then, and so it is something you do try to keep it as simple as possible. So you aren't like having the three-legged dog version out there and everything's all different, but so you do try to make it simple. But once you get it in there the first time or the first couple of times, it is not as burdensome, because if you think about the universe of properties that you're trying to deal with, you're talking about a few hundred, not not the
Okay, fair
entire
enough.
city.
Agreed. Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of where that comes in. So that's one scenario here.
And so again, this is just yet another variation on that, but in this variation, the nonprofits will be the $1,000 base negotiated agreement with flexibility there, of course. And just to see if we get a different yield and maybe assuage some owners of properties here. I understand not everyone's going to be happy with everything, but I just wanted to create as many different scenarios so that we can pick and choose from the ones we like, create something that, is a Frankenstein that we love, and move forward with that.
So you see the difference here. This is the one we just looked at before. It yields a little bit higher, a little over 600,000, and this one is the differential is about $100,000 in this different scenario. So it is worth.
If I could add one point, just the nonprofits paying $1,000 base, while it may seem a bit low just on face value, some nonprofits would be, if they weren't paying that base, would be paying $38 for the year. So some properties will be paying much more with that base. Some properties will be paying far less, but it may even out, not quite even out. It's a little bit less of a yield, but it's relatively close.
John, can I just say, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask about the nonprofits or all of the property owners. Is there ability, are you thinking about leaning against properties if they don't pay this, or how?
Chris,
Yeah,
Legally, nonprofits don't have to pay anything. They're not required to. I'm just curious.
Yes, they are if they're part of the fee
If
structure.
it's in the fee structure, because it's all written the way that we will implement it. And if it's in our fee structure, they do have to.
I just want to give some people
I'm sorry. So you can put a lien against the nonprofit's property, the charity guild, let's say.
That I'm less certain of.
I believe you can.
Okay.
I just want to give people some numbers here. John, I took your figures going back a few weeks, and I think I'm sorry to interrupt so frequently, but I want everyone here, not just the 3 people on the subcommittee or 4 people on the subcommittee, to hear this. I think this is relevant in coming into determination, okay? So John, taking the numbers you provided in that Excel sheet, basically 48% of the land mass is owned by the city or nonprofits. So think about that. 48% of the land mass that we're talking about in this district is owned by nonprofits or the city. So that's relevant in coming up with a fee structure as well. Public owned is about 29.5%, nonprofit about 18.5%. So again, to have $1,000, like I said, I think a flat fee is best. I don't see that even that scenario out here. But it's difficult to come up with a structure when 50% of the land mass or property owners, so to say, don't have skin in the game. And again, I just wanted everyone to hear that, and I'll keep my mouth shut. And I can see the look on your face.
Well, I think that looking at it in that way doesn't reflect what the fee structure is being suggested. So that, you're not just dealing with land mass, you're dealing with the properties themselves, each parcel that you're looking at, and applying a fee structure to the
parcel.
parcel.
Has a certain size. For example, the post office takes up a large part of downtown. You're telling me that they're going to pay $1,000. You're telling me City Hall, which takes up a large parcel of downtown, that's $1,000.
No, I'm saying
Perkins Park, you have to look at the land mass, not just the properties, because it takes up 50% of the area we're trying to clean up.
But using the city as an example, we are not suggesting that the city should pay $1,000. We're saying the way the city participates and how it will be written into a fee structure would be that the city would participate through a negotiated agreement, and that negotiated agreement would have all of those kinds of things that we talked about earlier around what the city might be able to do, in addition to hopefully some cash investment as well. So that's how that shows up. The post office, if it's owned by,
So we don't have to get into individual parcels. Food for thought for the group. I wanted to throw that out there so everyone has it in their head.
the post office would be a publicly owned property if it's owned by the post office. So it would be also a negotiated agreement. And
Right,
if
like
it's
the police
federal
station.
property, it would
I'm
be a
just saying.
contract.
Take
I-
the police station, the train station in that area right there, nonprofits, right? What, I'm just saying, you know, it's
The police are
relevant to
not
the-
nonprofit, Joffrey. Anything
Okay.
that is government owned, publicly owned would be through an MOU. The nonprofits are very specifically like
All
OCPC
right, we can
or,
get to this in the
you know,
subgroup, but food for thought for everyone to
OCES.
know. I wanted people to be aware of the landmass and what we're talking about, because really this is coming from 50% of, you know,
Right, but we're
Private
not
owners.
talking about a fee structure based on land mass.
no, I get that. It's based on assessed value, but, you know.
Or
landmass is
types of
relevant.
use or and when you articulate what your fee structure looks like, that's what you're going to be defining, you know,
Does
how
City
do
Hall
the,
have
how,
an assessed value in?
pardon me?
Does
It
City Hall
does.
have an assessed value?
It does. And if you want, Joffrey, I can take the city
No, this is
owned
stuff for the
properties.
subcommittee meeting. Like I said, I'm just want everyone to hear kind of my thoughts here because I think it's
Yeah.
relevant when we break stuff down. And it's not going to be said publicly in another forum. So
I
Yeah.
think I could take the city owned properties, find out what their assessments and their under this fee structure or various fee structures may be, and then compare that to what the MOU may be, because the city is planning on putting in a large chunk of money, which I think will be vastly superior, not superior, but vastly more than any one property owner would, is my point.
Yeah, I think that's
Tim
what
would
you'll
go
find
for-
out when
Tim
you
would
do
go
that
for that.
assessment, but I think we can do that analysis, Jeffrey, because I think it's important to see, you know, that's this partnership with the city and how that translates into an MOU and the value of that. It's like if we were successful in talking to the DPW and they said, yes, we're going to pay overtime, or we're going to have different incrementally, you know, these enhancements in terms of services, there's a value to that. And that would be written into the MOU, and that affects your bottom line budget and top line budget.
I will say, Joffrey, I really appreciate this input because you're doing the work, you're doing the numbers, and I
It's
feel
very
not so
helpful.
alone.
Yeah,
Right.
I wanted to reiterate that too, that, you know, we were one of our first chambers to host the bid folks from the state to talk about the potential of implementing this in Brockton. It was 3 months after the state approved it. I mean, what we're talking about are people are at the table here who are trying to be helpful. And I think it should be taken in that realm, is that we're contributing professional perspective and on the ground perspective, and we understand there's a moving train and we're all trying to get, you know, our ideas in. So I don't want to be misperceived as wanting to stop the train. I want to be able to contribute in an efficient way so that we can all feel comfortable as the train, you know, continues to move down the tracks here.
Oh, absolutely, Chris. And Jeffrey, that's why,
No, I think
you
that's
know,
well said.
that's
I
why
agree.
that working committee is
what
is
just
so
Chris said.
important, because you have to own this. If it's something you can't live with, it's not going to work. So, you know, like massaging what this fee structure, as I said, every fee structure is different. So what's going to work to get to the bottom line of what you need to support a budget that you all agree on?
John, do you
what's
have a
going-
flat fee structure here for everyone to see, or no? Is that option even on the table, just out of curiosity?
I had not explored that option personally. I
I'm just
can
curious.
We can do that.
definitely do that flat fee.
So those were the ones we've considered. We can look at a flat fee structure, and we can also explore the conversation with, you know, how Quincy is approaching it, as, you know, things that we'll do. But the one thing that we heard loud and clear in our working group was, what do we do with properties that with a property owner that might own a number of different parcels, and in their aggregate, it comes up to a pretty big number. So what we were playing around with or the conversation that needs to happen within this working group is, do we, you know, and I would recommend this, that we aggregate individual parcels. If somebody owns a bunch of different parcels, we aggregate those parcels, and that structure would apply to the aggregated number. So it would fit into that aggregated number. So if you ended up with say you own 4 parcels, they add up to the highest level, then your fee would be applied to that, whatever that fee structure looks like, that it's applied across the board in your aggregated number. So that's one scenario. The other scenario would be to consider a cap on what, because really we have 84% of the properties in this district are in that lowest range. There's a handful, there's probably a dozen properties owners that are in the highest range. And so, you know, trying to come up with something that's fair and equitable to both ends of the spectrum is important. So we're playing around with that. The two opportunities that we are exploring are, one is to aggregate the total value of those individual parcels. And then also perhaps there's a cap. But if there is a cap, we would in the fee structure write some escalator language, because one of the bids that's 25 years old put a cap on their fee structures. Their expenses 25 years later are not the same as they were in the beginning, and there was no escalator language in their fee structure. So some of those property owners were
Inflation
not
guard.
able to rise. So it's tied to some index that would allow that to be taken into consideration. So those are two things that we need to do more work on, and would ask the working committee to, you know, to continue to massage those. So just to give you an idea, we have 84% of the properties that fall into that lowest range. So the vast majority of those property owners within this district are in that kind of a value. And then you see the others and how they all add up. So that's the challenge we have, is try to come up with something that is doable for most and fair to the largest.
Right.
And these are just some example properties of how these different scenarios play out. And again, these are just meant to be illustrative. We need to do some work on those, because you're going to pick up some things that just simply don't work, as Jeffrey mentioned, in some of these scenarios that we're discussing. So you'll all have these. This is a work in progress. This is work that the subcommittee has been working on, and John and Rob and I are working on all of these different things. So we can further do another scenario where we try to do some flat rates. But I think if I guess feedback around, we don't need, this is really was intended to be more for the working group. But I'm going to stop sharing this now so we can see each other. But the idea was that to give you a good sense of what we think this budget, given what we have talked about as priorities and what we think are realistic numbers, whether or not this budget is something that we should be working towards, because that's going to drive, you know, how we approach, you know, a fee structure and other resources we try to bring into the table.
So I just have a question on the Assembly of God, which was on the last slide. It was valued between 1 million and 2.99 million at 199 Warren Avenue. In this different scenarios, there's no scenario in this matrix you've got has a flat fee. Is that
Because
something?
yeah,
They haven't done that yet. They're going to do the flat fee scenario. It's just not.
Well, as a nonprofit, though, didn't you have that as if it's a nonprofit, it's $1,000 minimum?
yeah, John did it.
I'm trying to pull it up here so I can see myself.
Yeah, hold on, I'll try to go back. Whoops.
God.
Yeah, when I say flat fee, I meant the
Yeah.
minimum $1,000 for nonprofits. But
No, that is a very good catch. I apologize. I
think this is the old slide, John. We need to update this.
think I missed that.
that's all right. I was just
No,
trying
no.
to
Well,
understand it.
so instead of the flat fee, I used the word negotiated. That's the flat fee.
I see.
Yes.
Or
With
the
the
minimum
$1,000. Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I apologize.
No, that's all right.
Yes, there may be some large property owners that are nonprofits, like we saw this in Worcester, where, you know, they felt that they, even though it was a Worcester's is a flat rate across the across the board, but you, in other places where you have negotiated fees with property, with nonprofits, we have negotiated fees with some of the larger, let's say hospital, that might be in a bid. That number is a big number for them, so, and they see themselves, and when we have a negotiated thing with some of the nonprofits and most of the bids, some of those are pretty substantial nonprofits. They could be a hospital, they could be a Y, they could be a big facility. And they typically come in at a bigger or more equitable number to what the commercial properties would. So when you have it as a negotiated fee, they take the form of an MOU, and those are, so then when you have a negotiated fee, then you have a little church, you might have that negotiated MOU be something like, we'll do programming, we'll put an organ recital, we'll give you $1,000, but it's smaller, those small ones. But the big ones, through a negotiated agreement, you're able to deal with, more substantial properties. And so that's kind of, so yes, everybody's got their skin in the game relative to what, their size and capacity might be.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to do a quick time check. I know that Rob had to go to another meeting. I actually have another one that I'm going to jump on late. They know I'm jumping on late, but today's discussion, I think, is probably really it's not concluded. There's still a lot more to do. We have these meetings on a weekly basis. I know there's a complication, whether a small group or large group. I think at this point, we keep going at these Thursdays, and because again, having the dialogue and having the information, this is numbers. John, I think there was going to be a couple maybe tweaks you're going to do to this presentation. I think it would be helpful if the folks have a copy of this so they can review it a little bit more detailed. I would highly recommend, if you can, vet it out, ask questions, because if you're asking questions, somebody else is going to think about it, right? That's always the adage that one comes from, but we really want to be able to keep this moving, and to the point that let's not be that gerbil on the wheel that just kind of just spins and talks. That's not the intention that I have, nor Anne or anybody else. But in order for us to keep moving, that's why it's being recorded. We'll get that out. We'll solicit the information, the questions, get it back, and really start looking at, I don't think we should be looking at scenarios any longer, the ones that don't work, right? We're going to look for that flat fee so that can move forward. And then really kind of punch that through again.
Yeah, well, John and I will continue to look at that scenario. And Chris, if you have a contact person in Quincy, if you could pass that along to me, we'll follow up with that. I don't know who that is.
I would think it was the mayor. I think either our mayor asking him, or I'm a resident. I'm not a resident, but I have property there too. So I'm happy to ask him. But I don't know if I'm the right person to do that.
Oh no, I'm happy to follow up with it. It just who do we talk
And
to?
the only thing I would be careful about, and I'm just because it comes from the old role that I would been in, if any of us are calling the mayor of Quincy is going to call Mayor Sullivan. So I would I can do it just as easily saying in a conversation, this came up, we're going to contact unless the mayor would like to have the conversation. So I'm just careful about those dynamics, and what usually
John, maybe you and Rob can figure out, ask how to do that reach out.
Or maybe DPW to DPW. I mean, maybe the person who replaced Coke as the DPW director might.
I think it can happen on all levels. Again, this is it. For us to move forward, it needs to get the mayor comfortable. It needs to get the DPW. It needs to get us comfortable. So anyway, we'll work with John and Rob about that and the best way to approach it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of information here. That this is still a work in progress. We're hoping to have the working group, kind of continue to. I'll work with John on some other scenarios, and Jeffrey, if you'd like to be a part of that conversation, happy to include you.
I'm going to reemphasize what Chris said earlier. I think this is a good idea. I want it to work. So I say everything in a positive manner, I don't want it to be insinuated or, taken in any other way. I just, and kind of speaking my mind and the analytics, and, I think Chris said it best earlier, and I concur with what he said 100% about, wanting to just make sure we're doing this the right way.
Right.
I don't want to seem negative or like I'm trying to, hold
Nope.
anything back,
Nope.
because that's
No
certainly
one's
not my
gonna take it that
intention.
way.
No,
Yeah.
I
Okay,
think these
good,
are
good.
the
I
things
just-
we need to
okay.
hear too, honestly,
Okay.
because they're going to
Yeah,
come
no,
up
it's,
later.
it's
So,
very helpful. But it's really helpful is if you clearly have given this a lot of thought. If you have something that that we can sit down with you and say, let's work it out this way and see, how those
Well, I thought
numbers
that's what
work
the
out.
subcommittee was for. So I mean, this is going back
Yeah,
a few
that is
weeks. I
what
just
the
opened up my
subcommittee
notes
is
from
for.
like a month ago from John's, Excel sheet, which is, by the way, kudos to you for taking the time to do that. But I mean, so if we have a subcommittee meeting, we go over it, we can do that. I mean, we haven't really done that, to be honest. You guys just put these things together now and I'm seeing them for the first time, and I'm just giving you my notes going back a month based on a spreadsheet.
Okay, so at the last meeting, we talked about a number of different scenarios. These are kind of a drill down from the feedback we got from the
Okay, great. And
second meeting.
whatever you want to be done,
So
I'm
we
glad to be
want
part
a
of.
working committee meeting, and anybody else who wants to join in on that working committee, Chris, if you'd like to join in on that, that'd be great. And Jeffrey, you've been an awesome component to that discussion. So at the next working committee meeting, we'll have those other couple of alternatives, and really we'd like to refine this to a point where it gets to the budget, it gets to something we feel comfortable with, and say, this is it. This is what we're proposing as a fee structure back. So that work, it's important. It's not, this is your fee structure. So you guys as property owners need to, get comfortable with that. And whatever that form takes, it can take any form we want it. And we'll run some flat numbers, and we'll try to do that again, and we'll set up a next working committee meeting.
I think
Okay,
that,
thank you guys.
no, thank you again.
I just wanted to add in this discussion is so important because all the questions we're asking, we're gonna bring it into clarity, but then when we bring it out to the community, these are the questions they're gonna ask us too.
Of course,
Correct.
And
yes.
so
Absolutely.
we're
Exactly
gonna
right.
be prepared. We're laying a foundation here.
That's
And
correct.
so this is great. I just love it. I'm learning every week, and thank you for everybody's input.
And
Thank you,
just,
everybody.
and Chris, you made a comment about frequently asked questions. I'm working on those frequently asked questions that you are going to get, everybody's going to get. And so, I'll hopefully have a draft of that to share with you in the next meeting.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.